we're spending a lot of time looking at community engagement and also this kind of emerging mobile optimized engagement. And so I wanted to see if you could give us kind of your views. I know you talk a lot about transformative engagement, and could you kind of talk through the concepts that you bring to the table when you're doing community planning and the things that we've been using on our projects and kind of how you see those all working?
Sure. Well, first of all, a little bit of definition maybe. There's a couple of underlying concepts that are really important to community engagement from our practice and our point of view. And one of them is fundamental really to transformation. So transformation is really about provoking some kind of change, some experience that creates change in us. So in the definition of transformation is the word change, but transformation is larger than that. And so we like to think about change through a transformative experience. And so if we can create that experience that takes people out of their day-to-day concerns and connects them to something larger, then that's the place at which we can actually then begin to go back into an engagement perspective, a point of view with broader implications, and understand ourselves connected to something larger than just ourselves. Mm-hmm. Our communities are not homogeneous communities in the United States. We have really diverse and rich communities with lots of different cultures. And so engaging in the community, engaging in the built environment in the United States in particular is actually quite difficult, more difficult than if we were a homogeneous society, mm-hmm. cultural society. So we kind of developed this framework that brings together different voices, that addresses issues of equity, of engagement, of empowerment, of responsibility. And to do that, we have to kind of stretch along that spectrum of engagement from maybe what people knew, which was informing them of things that are going to happen in their community, versus really deeply engaging them in the development and the making of their own places. So
Can you talk a little bit about how we do that? In terms as professional planners and as we're teaching professional facilitation and we're using it with our clients and with our colleagues, a little bit about how we can really bring that together.
Yeah. So for me, and I mentioned I have a little maybe unusual background, that I have a diverse background where I've studied quite a bit and practiced in pre-Columbian culture sort of belief systems that were pre-Columbian in the Americas. There's a concept that exists in those cultures that I studied in particular, that is the Nawal. The Nawal is a teacher leader. So it combines two concepts that we have in English. Sometimes we think of a leader, as leading an organization, a company, a country, whatever it is. And then we have teachers. In this conception of Nawal, the idea of teacher and leader are merged. And I love that as a model, because the ultimate success of a Nawal is not their own accomplishments, but it's how much they can elevate those around them through teaching, leading. So the success of a Nawal is determined by the success or the accomplishment of the goals of those who are in their cohort, so to speak. So I use that model to think about community facilitation or community engagement, which is we're first and foremost teachers, because a lot of times many of us grow up in our communities with very little community or built environment awareness, mm-hmm. like we're very focused on it because that's our work, but lots of people walk down the street and they don't notice the same things that we notice, or they don't have the tools to kind of articulate what they're experiencing in the same way that we do, that's in a usable form for us. So rather than actually having them transform the way they perceive their communities, our process is we go in and we help understand how they perceive their communities, and then we merge our vocabularies. And in doing that, there's a sort of bilateral or reciprocal dialogue where we're learning always and they're learning always. And so the way that you just mentioned, you have to balance that between new information that you bring, but the wisdom that the community has is so much broader and deeper than our wisdom that we can bring as a facilitator. So setting up the ground for that bilateral dialogue is kind of the first important step. And we have lots of kind of fun and lighthearted tools. We like to use lots of cartoons, for example, of what it means to kind of understand each other. So for example, we have this kind of aligning expectations cartoon that we use, which shows a movie screen and people in the audience, and they're looking all at one image on the screen, but everybody in their head has a different image. And that's because
Right.
we're all different people. The biggest
Right.
challenge then that we have to overcome in community engagement is really aligning those visions or aligning those expectations or working really hard on the communication. So when I say, you know, plaza, we all have the same image or as close to the same image of a plaza as we can.
You know, we talk a lot about creating safe places to talk, and you know, having people come in who don't know each other and are coming in with different backgrounds, and a lot of times there is this kind of natural feeling of hierarchy because you've got the community leaders, right, who, you know, may or may not have, they may not have met them before, or they may not have ever been in a public meeting before or in a focus group. And we always have, you know, the people who love to talk, you know, the extroverts who are going to, you know, contribute no matter what, and they're going to talk a lot. And then we have the people who are much more shy. And so can you talk a little bit about creating, how we can create this place of safety so that people who may be less likely to be, you know, process verbally or less likely to raise their hands will give us their input?
Yeah. We try to create different ways of connecting on the same content, whatever the content is, in different modes. Okay. So for example, some people are going to be more comfortable, as you said, speaking right out loud because they're comfortable in that position. Other people need to think for a moment, gather their thoughts, then they're more comfortable talking in dyads, maybe in pairs of twos, and then they're comfortable sharing out in a slightly larger group, and then maybe there's a spokesperson for that group who can share the ideas of the entire group. So we try to create everything along that spectrum, from quiet thinking time to small kind of dialogue time to small group sharing to full group share outs. And that's a pretty effective tool. In teaching, they call it think, pair, share in elementary and K-12 contexts. In our community engagement, we call it 1, 2, 4, which is you have time to think to yourself, you have time to share in a dialogue with one other person, then you go to a group of 4 persons, and the time of that works 1, 2, 4 also, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 4 minutes. And then at the end of that 4 minutes, you can actually have a pretty robust discussion on a single topic, and then whoever's comfortable, you can share out. That share out can be verbally or written, right?
Really, we've been surprised about the sheer volume of people who want to communicate in a written way. And this is assuming that we're all in an English speaking forum, but you know, the idea that everybody wants to be there and contribute. So yeah, have you seen, you know, other ways? I mean, I know we use mixed methods. We use what we call an iterative method, where same thing, where we prefer to meet with people, you know, 3 or 4 times at least over the life cycle of a project, so that we can really get people to be comfortable and give us their opinion. But at the same time, wanting to make sure that even if we only have an hour, sometimes our meetings or focus groups are less, you know, 20 minutes to an hour. And it's like, okay, how can we quickly gather as much information in a safe environment so that we can inform the process?
Yeah. What I've seen in the virtual environments, and we've started to engage, and actually I became aware of this in our first experience together, translating to mobile engagement in our Groton project, was it takes people a while to warm up even to the video format. So at first everyone's really quiet, and we had the chat box open and we're saying, please chat. And we did polls, which is great because it's a way for people to kind of answer some questions and get used to it. But it wasn't until kind of the end of the hour or so that we had together that all of a sudden the chat board started really flapping up and lots of numbers. So it made me think, and then we've kind of put this into action since, that we should really do icebreakers in mobile format. We do icebreakers in person altogether, where we sit down, we have people meet each other at the table that they're sitting at, they talk about their favorite food or their first pet, or, you know, whatever icebreaker we throw out there. And I'm always inviting people, and it's so funny, it's like folks sit down at a table and they're sitting with their friends, and I make them count off. Some of them go, oh, I know what you're going to do. You're going to make us change tables. And I said, yes, I am. And so they count off 1 to 6, however many tables, and then they regroup themselves and just say, think, you're going to come away with 6 new friends maybe that you didn't meet tonight. So then we do some icebreakers where they can actually get to know people around them. But I'm thinking in the mobile format, we should do icebreakers too. What can we do to kind of have more informal conversations? And so we've been using this meeting rooms, smaller breakout groups at the beginnings of sessions, for either participants to get to know each other, and then some of the facilitators can be in those breakout groups as well. And we talk about everything from how many kids we have to our, what we did at our barbecue last weekend, to whatever. Because first and foremost, we have to connect as people. If we connect as people, not as our roles or as our titles, then all of a sudden we're much more comfortable. So we moved all of that to the beginning of sessions. So the first 15 minutes now we spend just getting to know each other.
I mean, I know in Parks and Recreation Master Planning, which is where we do most of our work, there have been times where we have had the biggest benefit of the entire plan is that we've been able to create a room with 12 to 10 to 12 15 people. We try not to go over 16 too many for a focus group, but those people who are maybe they're all sports, but they're all sports people who have not met the people from the other sports. And so they, for example, in Winter Haven, Florida, we had this where the football players were just certain that they were the poor stepchild of the community and that they were the only ones who didn't have ball fields, right? And then so what we did was we purposefully went around the room and started with the aquatics people who also felt that they were being short-shifted, And so as we went through, we had everybody introduce exactly who they are and what their challenge was, where they felt their needs were, and gave everybody a quick introduction. And by in a horseshoe shape, right? So that's in an in-person room. By the time we got to the football players, the gentleman, great big guy who came in, ready for bear, said, I had no idea. I had no idea there were so many needs and so many people in this room that had challenges too. And it completely changed and shifted the entire community dynamic around providing new facilities and new amenities for that community. And I know when that project was done, the director said, that was the best thing this project could have ever done for us. Yes, we'll get a plan and it's all going to be wonderful, but the fact that we've got these 16 people who now know about each other and talk to each other and understand that we're not here to take things away from each other. I think sometimes we can have that transformative experience that was huge and it changed everything going forward, even though that wasn't really the focus of the master plan. It just ended up being that way. So sometimes I really love that when things like that happen.
Yeah. And I've had that experience also, even facilitating a pretty homogeneous group. Like we do lots of strategic planning as well. So I recently completed a strategic plan for School of Architecture. And you'd think a bunch of architects could get in the room and talk about things, but no, it's human nature. Like even if we're that coalesced around a field of study or a discipline, each person then stakes out their own territory and kind of forgets the perspective of everybody around them. So whatever we can do to broaden everybody's awareness to say, and this sounds corny, but we actually have more in common than we have difference. It helps a lot just to kind of open the frame of the conversation with those commonalities, building that common frame of reference, that common understanding. It says, oh, maybe I'm not the only one who's feeling this way. It may look a little bit different there, but I'm actually feeling that way as well. And whatever we can do to kind of pique that awareness, the greater success we'll have, because it started off with that transformation, that moment of slipping our day-to-day awareness and going, oh, this is about something bigger than me. And oh yeah, they all have the same concerns. And isn't that?
I think that's great. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit, obviously we're both white women, right? And so as we approach it, and we're professional facilitators, I know we are always integrating different ways that we can either reach people with color or people who with English is not their first language. Can you talk about some of the techniques and methods that you use in your projects to kind of help with those aspects?
Yeah. First of all, cultural differences are real and are huge and are rich and need to be respected. And so sometimes people get frustrated because, like, wait, there's this whole community of folks that are maybe of Hispanic heritage or Latin heritage, and like they're not showing up at our groups. Well, yes, because the number one thing that's important to that culture is to be in their safe space, in their comfort space, where their cultural feels anchored and rooted in what they know and what they feel comfortable for. So when we've gone into communities, say here in Willimantic, Connecticut, that's not too far from Groton, where we're working together, we set up ways where we could go into other communities asked to be invited in and asked to meet in a context that felt safe and comfortable for them. So rather than asking people to come to us, we go to them.
We're not here to tell people what to do.
Yeah.
We are here to be, to represent the voices of all the community together. And if we do that well, we're hearing from everyone else. And we're just basically kind of organizing it, bringing it into a written form so people can use it going forward, reporting it back. And I think that if we can get, again, it's back to that trust piece, right? We want to hear everyone who wants to and should be heard, but we have to do it in a way and use the technology to our benefit and not as a way to alienate. So yeah, and I know, so let's go forward a little bit more on this idea of either what we're calling mobile optimized or online virtual community engagement. Can you talk about, from your viewpoint, the pros and cons of that kind of engagement and kind of how you see it moving forward?
The challenges and the benefits are kind of rolled in one. So where we can meet virtually, it eliminates a lot of the challenges of transportation, childcare, and things like that people can sometimes run into in attending in person a community meeting. The Flipside Challenges, not everybody has the same access to a computer, to internet service, and to other of the kind of components that you need to meet virtually. Like we faced this when our schools had to go remote, right? Lots of schools found out that there weren't even computers in every home. And we have some expectation of that, but that's actually a really inaccurate expectation. There are lots and lots of homes that don't have computers in-house. So we're in the middle of trying to transition to, can there be remote places that people can meet and gather in smaller groups where they can be socially distant and safe, and then convene multiple locations in a digital format. So we kind of do a little hybrid of both. So you can have meetings of 6 people can come together in a neighborhood in someone's house who's familiar, who does have the equipment necessary to connect, a computer and Wi-Fi or internet, but they can be safe and they can still kind of gather in a larger format. So, and still have kids taken care of, transportation, not an issue.
Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time. Is there any other things as we're working with our clients and with our colleagues across the country and really trying to, is there anything else that you feel like we should really make sure that we share today?
Change is always happening. People generally say they hate change because it pushes everyone into the unknown for just a moment. So there's a reason, for example, why democracy goes so slow, because the idea of democracy is that we have to change incrementally and bring large groups of people along with the change. So when we're forced into a situation where we have to change right away, there's lots of reaction and discomfort, and it puts us all in a place of unknown, right? We're sitting in a place of unknown right now with what the pandemic has done to our ability to function in the way that we're used to. And so our first reaction as a human being is to try to analog what we knew before, right? There's comfort in what we knew before. And so what I've been witnessing as we've been translating what we do into a new format is that we're analoging what we did before. Okay, let's try to recreate this experience. Let's try to recreate this, recreate. So that's good as a kind of coping evolutionary mechanism. But I also am kind of challenging our teams and myself to think, well, what can we innovate? And so we just touched on this in our last conversation a little bit, but there are really great new things that can come out of this moment if we're not stuck in just analoging what we knew. But if we think about kind of what are we trying to get at that basic idea and divorce it from the solution, because that's what the analog is usually doing. The analog is trying to create the solution for what we knew before. But if we get at what we were trying to get at before, that core idea, and we find new solutions, we can innovate new ways of being that move us forward after this circumstance has resolved itself, right? And what, like, no good crisis should go unwasted, right? Is that Rahm Emanuel's campaign? Yeah. No good crisis should go to waste. So like out of this crisis, like what can we pull out of this and innovate to do what we do better,